The inn of the Sixth Happiness premiere at New York, and to it Lance Ravenglow brings Jill St. John, fresh from her starring role with Clifton Webb in the remarkable Mr. Pennypacker. Red Buttons, too, is on hand for the new Buddy Adler-produced Triumph. Also Danny Kaye with the Saul Schwartzes and Party. A rapture in CinemaScope directed by Mark Robeson, the inn of the Sixth Happiness Gala attracts Dina Merrill and hubby Stan Rombo, and Korean War hero General Van Fleet and his family. While here with Mr. and Mrs. Spiro Skouras, after interrupting her tour for the premiere, which will swell the Queen's Fund for Greek orphans, is the lovely Princess Sophie of Greece. Acclaimed in London and New York as one of the year's greatest films, The Inn of the Sixth Happiness, directed by Mark Robeson, scores another triumph for its producer, Buddy Adler, at its Hollywood premiere. With a cavalcade of glittering cars bringing a fascinating company of stars and celebrities to the gala first night. Among those attracted to the star-studded CinemaScope release, it boasts Ingrid Bergman, Kurt Jurgens, and Robert Donat as principals, is alluring Jane Mansfield, fresh from her hilarious role in The Sheriff of Fractured Jaw. Her escort is hubby Mickey Hargitay, who's handing out cigars.
Hollywood in the 1950s sparkled with red carpets, champagne, and camera flashes. But behind the gowns and tuxedos, the truth was anything but glamorous. Stars lived double lives, studios buried dark secrets, and scandals exploded that could ruin careers overnight. This was an era when a single headline could destroy a legend, and some of the biggest names in Hollywood were hiding things the world was never meant to see.
1952, Tinseltown was in for a shock. Former Girly magazine publisher Bob Harrison had put together a magazine which peeped through the lurid underside of Hollywood to the tawdry private lives of stars. Its name was Confidential, and its headline spelled scandal.
In the glittering 1950s, Hollywood sold a dream: perfect marriages, flawless stars, and happily ever afters. But the illusion began to crumble the moment Confidential magazine hit the newsstands. Founded in 1952, this wasn't just another gossip rag. It was a cultural earthquake. Confidential promised readers the lowdown on the lowdown, and for the first time, America was getting unfiltered access to the private lives of its idols. No one was safe. Rock Hudson, Marilyn Monroe, Errol Flynn, names that had been untouchable, suddenly found themselves splashed across pages with stories about affairs, addictions, and late-night scandals. The magazine bragged that it printed the stories the movie studios don't want you to read, and readers couldn't get enough. Millions of copies flew off shelves each month, making it one of the most powerful publications in the country. For Hollywood stars, though, it was a nightmare. Imagine working years to craft the image of America's sweetheart, only to have Confidential expose your secret fling or drunken arrest in bold letters for the entire nation to see. Lawsuits were filed, denials were issued, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. In fact, the more celebrities fought back, the more curious the public became. And here's the kicker. Sometimes the magazine wasn't even wrong. Hollywood's golden image really was built on lies, carefully staged publicity stunts, and airtight cover-ups. Confidential simply cracked the facade wide open. But while the magazines were busy blowing secrets into the open, the studios had their own army of fixers, working behind the scenes to make sure some scandals never saw the light of day. Studio cover-ups. If Confidential magazine was Hollywood's wrecking ball, then the studios were the construction crew scrambling to rebuild the walls. In the 1950s, every major studio had what insiders called fixers, powerful men whose only job was to make scandals disappear. These fixers had deep ties to the police, judges, and the press. If a star was caught drunk driving, the report might vanish before it even hit the desk. If an actor was arrested in a hotel room with the wrong company, suddenly the police chief was taking a donation to his retirement fund. Newspapers that relied on Hollywood's advertising money knew better than to print stories that could destroy a studio's golden goose. The system was ruthless but effective. MGM's fixer, Eddie Mannix, was so feared that insiders joked he could make a body disappear before breakfast. Warner Bros. Was no different. Rumors swirled that one of their leading men got into a violent altercation that left someone in the hospital, but no charges were ever filed. The public never knew, and the box office receipts kept rolling in. To outsiders, this looked like glamorous Hollywood. perfect couples smiling at premieres, stars arriving in gleaming Cadillacs. But behind the curtains, it was a chess game of secrets, bribes, and cover-ups. And while the fixers were busy burying one scandal after another, some stars were so reckless that not even Hollywood's most powerful protectors could shield them from their own downfall. The fall of Errol Flynn. In the golden age of swashbuckling adventure, no one shined brighter than Errol Flynn. He was Robin Hood, the gallant pirate, the man who could swing from a chandelier with a sword in his hand and a smirk on his face. To the public, he was the embodiment of charm and heroism. But behind the screen, Flynn lived a life that was just as wild, only far more dangerous. His troubles erupted in the late 1940s when he was accused of misconduct with two teenage girls. The trial gripped the nation. Reporters packed the courtroom, sketch artists captured every smirk and wink, and Americans were divided. Was he the victim of lies or the ultimate Hollywood predator? In 1943, he was acquitted, but the verdict didn't matter. The damage was permanent. From then on, "in like Flynn" became a phrase that summed up his reputation for reckless pleasure, not heroic adventure. By the 1950s, his career should have been peaking. Instead, it was unraveling. Flynn had developed a taste for excess. Hard drinking, drug use, and women were his constant companions. Parties at his Mulholland Drive home became notorious, attracting celebrities, hangers-on, and scandals that even the best studio fixers couldn't bury forever. There were whispers of fights, affairs, and dangerous encounters that never made the newspapers. Stories that insiders passed around in hushed tones, knowing they were too explosive for the public to handle. Hollywood still needed his star power, but the box office numbers were slipping. The daring charm that had once captivated audiences now looked reckless and sad. He was cast in fewer roles. His looks began to fade under the strain of his lifestyle, and his legend was being rewritten in real time, from golden hero to Hollywood cautionary tale. And yet, in a way, Flynn leaned into it. He seemed to relish his reputation as Hollywood's wildest playboy. He joked about his trials, bragged about his conquests, and poured fuel on the fire of his own downfall. The man who once played Robin Hood had become a rogue in his own story, untouchable, unstoppable, and tragically self-destructive. But Errol Flynn's spiral wasn't the only shadow looming over 1950s Hollywood. If he represented the dark side of the leading man, Marilyn Monroe embodied the dangerous pressure placed on Hollywood's most luminous starlet. Marilyn Monroe, secrets behind the smile. No star defined the 1950s more than Marilyn Monroe. With her platinum blonde hair, breathy voice, and magnetic screen presence, she wasn't just an actress. She was the symbol of desire, glamour, and Hollywood perfection. But that perfection was a carefully constructed illusion, and behind the smile was a woman battling demons that the cameras never revealed. Marilyn's rise was meteoric. She transformed from Norma Jean, a foster child who bounced between unstable homes, into the most photographed woman in the world. Studios branded her as the dumb blonde, casting her in roles that showcased her beauty but rarely her talent. Behind the scenes, Marilyn fought bitterly against this image. She wanted to be taken seriously as an actress, studying at the Actors Studio in New York, but Hollywood only wanted the fantasy. And while her star was climbing, her personal life became fuel for whispers and speculation. Affairs with powerful men followed her everywhere. Rumors of entanglements with directors, studio executives, and even high-ranking politicians. Gossip columns hinted at a secret romance with President John F. Kennedy, though it would only become public speculation years later. Each new rumor only deepened the sense that Marilyn lived in a dangerous balance between power and vulnerability. Her marriages added more chaos to her image. With baseball legend Joe DiMaggio, she was half of America's favorite couple, until their explosive fights spilled into the press. DiMaggio reportedly couldn't handle Marilyn's stardom or her famous sex symbol persona, and the marriage dissolved after just 9 months. Her next marriage, to playwright Arthur Miller, shocked Hollywood. What was the world's most glamorous woman doing with a serious intellectual? The cracks quickly showed there too, as Marilyn's insecurities and Miller's disapproval played out behind closed doors. All the while, Marilyn struggled privately with anxiety, insomnia, and an increasing dependency on pills and alcohol. The pressure to maintain her image, perform on set, and meet the demands of an industry that saw her as both a goddess and a product began to take its toll. Studios tried to downplay her lateness, her breakdowns, and her battles with exhaustion, but the truth seeped out. Monroe wasn't living the dream, she was trapped by it. And yet, the more fragile she became, the more the world adored her. Her smile lit up magazines, her films broke box office records, and her very presence was intoxicating. But behind every photo op and premiere, there were whispers that the world's brightest starlet was living on borrowed time. And Marilyn wasn't alone in hiding who she really was. If her secret battles played out in whispers, Rock Hudson's secret was one Hollywood worked relentlessly to conceal. Rock Hudson and Hollywood's hidden closet. On screen, Rock Hudson was the embodiment of American masculinity. Tall, handsome, and effortlessly charming, he was cast as the rugged leading man in epic dramas and romantic comedies alike. Women swooned, men admired him, and the studios marketed him as the ultimate heartthrob of the 1950s. But behind the carefully polished image, Hudson was living a secret that Hollywood was desperate to keep hidden. In reality, Rock Hudson was gay, a truth that, in the rigid culture of the 1950s, could have ended his career overnight. At the time, homosexuality was not only socially taboo, but also considered scandalous enough to destroy the illusion of a studio-manufactured idol. For Universal Pictures, who had invested heavily in Hudson as their next big star, his private life was seen as a ticking time bomb. The solution? Cover it up. Studio executives orchestrated lavender marriages, arranged relationships between closeted actors and women who served as public companions. In 1955, Hudson married Phyllis Gates, his agent's secretary, in what many insiders believed was a publicity stunt designed to silence rumors. Gossip columns had begun circling too closely, and a wife provided the perfect alibi. To the world, Rock Hudson was a devoted husband. Behind the curtain, though, it was an open secret in Hollywood that the marriage was for show. Hudson's double life was agonizing. To fans, he was the leading man every woman dreamed of. To insiders, he was another casualty of a system that forced stars to sacrifice their truth for ticket sales. Even his closest friends knew the risks. If the truth ever got out, his career, contracts, and public image would collapse in an instant. And yet, the danger only fueled the allure. Whispered rumors about Hudson's private life circulated quietly, but no one dared to publish them. Studios had too much power, and the public wasn't ready to face the reality that their screen idols might not match the roles they played. So the cover-up held, and Rock Hudson remained one of the decade's biggest stars. But his story revealed something far larger. Hollywood in the 1950s wasn't just about making movies. It was about manufacturing myths. Stars weren't just actors, they were products, carefully packaged for mass consumption, no matter what truths had to be buried to keep the illusion alive. And if Rock Hudson's secret was hidden behind closed doors, Elizabeth Taylor's scandal would explode into the public eye with a love triangle that captivated and shocked the entire world. Elizabeth Taylor and the Scandalous Affair. By the late 1950s, Elizabeth Taylor had already lived several lifetimes in the public eye. She had been a child star at MGM, grown into one of the most beautiful women on the planet, and carried herself with the poise of a queen. But behind the diamonds and violet eyes, Taylor was no stranger to scandal. And in 1959, she stepped into one of the most infamous love triangles Hollywood had ever seen. At the time, Taylor was grieving. Her third husband, producer Mike Todd, had tragically died in a plane crash in 1958, leaving her devastated. Among the friends who offered comfort was singer Eddie Fisher, a man who was not only her close friend, but also the husband of America's sweetheart, Debbie Reynolds. Reynolds and Taylor were considered Hollywood's golden pair of best friends, both young, glamorous, and beloved by the public. No one expected betrayal, but soon, whispers began. Eddie Fisher wasn't just consoling Elizabeth, he was spending nights at her home, attending events at her side, and eventually leaving his wife and children to be with her. The press seized on the story, and by the time Fisher publicly divorced Reynolds to marry Taylor, the scandal had exploded into headlines around the world. Debbie Reynolds, once adored as the girl next door, was cast as the heartbroken victim. Eddie Fisher was painted as the weak husband who had abandoned his family. And Elizabeth Taylor? she was branded with a new title, homewrecker. For a star already known for her fiery beauty, the label stuck like a scarlet letter. Magazines ran lurid covers about the woman who stole America's husband, and audiences who once adored her were suddenly divided. But if Hollywood expected Taylor to crumble under the backlash, they underestimated her. She doubled down, embracing her role as the scandalous temptress rather than apologizing for it. In her words, "You can't break up a happy marriage." The affair didn't just rock Hollywood gossip. It became a cultural earthquake, blurring the line between on-screen drama and real-life soap opera. Taylor's willingness to defy convention, even at the cost of her reputation, made her one of the most talked-about stars of the decade. And while the scandal would eventually fade, it cemented her image as the woman who lived and loved on her own terms. But if Elizabeth Taylor's affair shocked audiences with its raw betrayal, Lana Turner's scandal would take things even darker, turning love, fame, and glamour into a story of violence, heartbreak, and tragedy that no studio fixer could bury. The Lana Turner case. By the late 1950s, Lana Turner was Hollywood royalty. Nicknamed the Sweater Girl for her glamorous pinup looks, she was the definition of screen allure. Men wanted her, women admired her, and MGM promoted her as the perfect blonde bombshell. But in 1958, Turner's name would become forever tied to one of Hollywood's darkest and most shocking scandals. Her boyfriend, Johnny Stompanato, wasn't a movie star. He was a mob enforcer. A handsome figure with underworld connections, Stompanato moved in glamorous circles, attaching himself to powerful women. With Lana Turner, he found his biggest prize. But behind the closed doors of their romance, things were far from glamorous. Friends and insiders whispered about his temper, his controlling behavior, and his violent outbursts. The tension between them grew more dangerous with time, and Turner reportedly tried to break free. But Stompanato wasn't the kind of man to walk away quietly. He threatened her, stalked her, and made scenes that terrified not only Lana, but her teenage daughter, Cheryl Crane. Then came the night of April 4th, 1958. At Turner's Beverly Hills home, a heated argument erupted between the actress and Stompanato. Cheryl, just 14 years old, listened in horror as the shouting grew louder and more violent. Fearing for her mother's life, Cheryl grabbed a kitchen knife and rushed into the room. In a single tragic moment, she stabbed Stompanato in the stomach. The mobster collapsed and died almost instantly. Hollywood went into shock. Headlines screamed the story, cameras camped outside Turner's home, and the trial became one of the biggest media spectacles of the decade. Lana Turner, teary-eyed and trembling, testified in court about the abuse she had endured. Cheryl was put on the stand, her childhood shattered by the glare of flashbulbs and the weight of public judgment. In the end, the jury ruled the killing justifiable homicide, declaring that Cheryl had acted to protect her mother. But the case left scars that never healed. For Lana Turner, the scandal followed her for the rest of her career. Every performance, every red carpet appearance carried the shadow of that night. For Cheryl, it was a trauma she would carry into adulthood, forever linked to a crime she committed as a child. The Stompanato case was more than a Hollywood scandal. It was a turning point. It showed the world that the glittering fantasy of movie stars could hide real darkness, violence, and tragedy. No fixer, no magazine, no studio could bury this story. It was too raw, too public, too unforgettable. And as the 1950s came to a close, Hollywood's golden age no longer looked so golden. Behind the glamour, it was clear. The world's most dazzling stars were also its most fragile, and the scandals of that decade would haunt them forever. Conclusion: the glitter in the shadows. On the surface, Hollywood in the 1950s was the picture of perfection. Red carpets, flashing bulbs, movie stars who seemed larger than life. But behind the scenes, it was a different story. Confidential magazine ripped the curtain open, exposing secrets the studios could no longer hide. Fixers scrambled to bury scandals before they could explode. Errol Flynn spiraled into self-destruction. Marilyn Monroe's luminous smile masked deep personal battles. Rock Hudson lived a double life, forced into silence by an industry that demanded illusion over truth. Elizabeth Taylor shocked the world with a scandalous affair, and Lana Turner's tragedy revealed just how dark the Hollywood dream could turn. The 1950s promised glamour, but what it delivered was a cautionary tale. The brighter the spotlight, the darker the shadows it cast. These weren't just stars. They were people trapped inside a machine that demanded perfection, no matter the cost. And in chasing that dream, many of them became legends, not only for their talent, but for their scandals, heartbreaks, and tragedies. Hollywood sold the world a fantasy, but the real stories, the ones whispered in back rooms, splashed across tabloids, and played out in courtrooms, were far more shocking than anything a screenwriter could have imagined. And that's the truth about Hollywood's golden decade. It glittered like gold, but underneath, it was built on secrets, lies, and scandals that still haunt the industry today.